Hi there, welcome to Hot Shaped Cake. Today we are making sourdough bread because I have to stock up on sourdough bread for back to school, for making lunches for my kids. And yeah, just follow along. First, I'm going to take my mixing bowl. I have my ready sourdough starter here. I have flour, water, salt, and that's it. You don't need anything else, just 4 ingredients. And also because my recipe is in gram, it's more accurate and more precise. I'm using my scale, and I start with water and then my sourdough starter. That was a little bit too much. Then I put in the salt and just a tiny bit of honey. And this is our own honey, so it's really delicious and it's so much better to any store-bought honey. It's raw, it's untreated, and it tastes so much different. Then we add the flour. In this case, it's whole wheat flour and a little bit more water, like a higher hydration. And then just mix it, put it in a bowl, let it rest. I guess 2 stretch and folds. Let it sit for 3 hours and then put it in the fridge after shaping and bake it the next day. That's it. See you in 30 minutes. The 30 minutes are over, so I'm going to do my first stretch and fold, which I'm going to show you how it works. So this is my sourdough, my bread dough. I have a little bit of water here to wet my hand. And I'm just going to pull one side up and flip it over. Now I'm going to let it rest for another 30 minutes and do my second stretch and fold. I'm doing the second stretch and fold, and then I'm just letting it sit on the counter for the next 2 or 3 hours and check once in a while how the fermentation looks like. If it's right, I'm going to shape it and put it in a proofing basket, and it rests overnight in the fridge. Baking day is always the next day, either in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on the fermentation. So again, this is my dough, and I'm gonna wet my fingers and just pull one side over the other and turn the bowl in between. Once you feel the dough is not stretchy anymore, like it's more tight, just leave it and for the next 30 minutes or so, and do another stretch and fold if you think you need to do it. Otherwise, just let it sit and rest and shape it once it's done. So the 2.5 hours fermentation time of my bread is done. One sign that I always check with my sourdough, like you can see my bread right away in the camera. Like it should come out of the bowl easily, and if you touch it, it shouldn't stick to your finger at all. If it's still sticky, just let it sit for another 30 minutes. So it should pop out of my bowl, and therefore I spray a little bit of water on my countertop so it's easier to lift it off, shape it, and put it in my proofing basket. So I have my spray bottle and spray just a little bit of water on my countertop and just flip the bowl and then waiting for the dough to just fall out of the bowl. And my bowl should look like that, so no dough left in it. Just pulling it a little bit apart and then just rolling it up. Create some tension on the dough, not too much, so like the bread dough shouldn't rip apart. It should stay intact, like that. This is my bread proofing bowl or basket, and I do have a little bit of rice flour. Just sprinkle it into the bowl. Lift your dough from the counter and just flip it into the proofing basket. Let it rest for another 10 minutes so the dough can a little bit relax, and then stitch it up so that it doesn't have this opening over here, and then it goes into the fridge, and that's it. After the dough has rested for about 10 minutes, the structure, like the gluten structure, could relax a bit more, so it's easier to just stitch it together. Just take some of the dough and just fold it to the inside. It's also a way to create a little bit more tension so that it will bake more nicely tomorrow. So this is going to go in the fridge until tomorrow. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Welcome back to my sourdough baking video. I have my bread already sitting on the counter. This is how it looks. It didn't hold shape in the fridge, so this should not be, but it happens. That's life, or bread in this case. So I'm going to show you what kind of tools I use and how I do the scoring. It doesn't matter if you use parchment paper, if you already have like a silicone mat like I do. If you use a sharp knife or a scoring tool, it doesn't really matter. So you can bake bread anyways, you don't need to buy those. So I have my silicone bread mat. I'm just going to flip the bread on it. My oven is already preheated. It has the temperature I need. I'm going to make sure that my bread has a nice round shape, because that's what this bread proofing basket is. I do have an oval shaped one as well, but in this case it's the round one. Just put a little bit of flour. You can also use rice flour if you like it. So the design I score later will be visible nicely after being baked. I use this little baking rope, string, whatever you call it, to do some marks for the design, and then you can use either a sharp knife or a specific scoring tool for breads and start scoring your design. Start with the fine details first and do the expansion score as last thing. And of course, I didn't make just one or two loaves. I have a couple more. Just put this aside. I do have this oval shaped one. And also a sign that I'm looking for when I have it in the fridge. If you poke it on one side, oh, it sticks to my finger, there should be a little dent visible. So if it springs immediately back, if the dough bounces back, it has more time to ferment in the fridge. If it leaves a dent or if it's slowly springing back, then the fermentation is right. So I'm not always using those oval shaped ones because my Dutch ovens are round. I make sure to, squish it a bit on the side so that it's going to fit into my Dutch oven. Again, just put a little bit of flour on it. So the design you score will be visible really nice with a little bit of flour, so kind of an accent. Again here, I'm doing an expansion score in the middle. And do some scoring on the side. So I'm doing the expansion core here on my whole wheat sourdough first. Don't be scared to score too deep. You need a certain depth to, give the bread enough room to expand. And we're also doing a second expansion score after 7 minutes. So the bread has more space to, bake and has a nice oven spring. Also here, doing the expansion score right in the middle. There we go. Now we just place it in the oven, in my Dutch oven. I'm also adding ice cubes to create a little bit more steam in the closed Dutch oven. That also helps the bread to rise nicer. As I said in my video earlier, I did not only make 1 or 2 loaves, I made 4 in total. So here are the next 2 breads. You can use either parchment paper or like silicone bread mats or whatever you have on hand. Just flip the dough over. And I'm using like a cheap version of bread baskets, like proofing baskets. I found the size at a dollar store and it has exactly the same size than my wooden proofing basket. So I'm using that. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my bread. Just have to put it in shape. Also start with the fine details first and then do your expansion score as last thing before you put the bread in the oven. So this is my expansion core and I just recut it or do a second cut after 7 minutes in the oven. My oven is already preheated and I put my sourdough bread always in a Dutch oven. And I also use and add ice cubes to have more steam, because the bread bakes nicer when you have added steam. So the bread is going to bake for 7 minutes, and then I'm doing my second expansion core to give the bread more room to expand so it bakes nicer. And I also add a couple more ice cubes after I did the second score. And I also turned down the oven heat just a tiny bit, because the Dutch oven needs to be at a certain temperature to have enough heat to let the bread rise nicely. Just gently lift it out of my Dutch oven, just trying to put it on the rack over here so it's easier for you to see. And I'm just using my scoring knife and just cut along the first cut that I did so that the bread has more room to expand. Put it back into the Dutch oven. Add another ice cube. Just on one side, doesn't matter. And repeat with the second loaf of bread. The total baking time for the bread is, with the lid on top, 20 minutes. So I stop after 7 minutes, do my second expansion score, and then put it back in the oven for another 13 minutes. And then after that, I just remove the lid and bake it for another 25 minutes. So I am just going to remove the lids of both Dutch ovens. And there we can have a little peek into Dutch ovens itself. Looks good so far. Just put it back in the oven and bake for another 25 minutes. There we go, bread number 1 and bread number 2. Looks really good with a nice oven spring, and I'm really happy how it turned out. So those are my ice cubes. And I'm just putting 1 or 2 in each Dutch oven. So my timer is set for 7 minutes. I also reduce the temperature just a little bit. So now we're waiting, and see you in 7 minutes. I'm placing it on the oven rack to show you, oops, that shouldn't happen. To show you how the scoring works, like the second one. I just cut along my first scoring, so that gives the bread a little bit more space. Going to place it back into my Dutch oven without dropping it off. Hopefully, yeah, it's a bit tricky with those oven cloves too. It's nice already. I'm just cutting along this first expansion core gently. The timer is up now and I can remove the lids. We're gonna have a first peek how the bread looks like. There we go. It's great. And the second one as well. Okay, once we remove the lid, it's going back into the oven for 25 minutes. So the first one is my whole wheat sourdough, which looks really nice. And oh, the second one looks also great. That was a plain white. Just have a little look over here. It looks great. And I like the colors and all the blisters on the side. And this is the whole wheat bread. Really yummy. My bread is all ready. It's baked, it's still warm. This one is the one for us, whole wheat. I have like a plain white one. Has a nice pattern, nice oven spring. And I have 2 of those organic rye white mix with flaxseed in it. Looks really nice. And these are going to some of our friends. Thanks for watching and see you next time.